Hey there! Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab some espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 202 is titled Meet Austin Pancner from the Functional Musician. Hey Flute 360er, are you a flutist who experiences tension, tightness, or occasional pain while you play? Research suggests that anywhere from 62 to 93% of musicians will fit into this category during their playing career. Or maybe you are a flutist that doesn't want to join this looming statistic and would rather play with less tension and more freedom. Either way, Austin Pancner, the founder and CEO of The Functional Musician, is running an 8-week online injury prevention course that begins on June 5th. Over 8 weeks, Austin will guide you through his injury prevention model to help you release tension, tightness, and pain. In addition, you will participate in daily movement routines, injury prevention lessons, and workshops, and develop a toolbox of techniques to manage and prevent distracting physical symptoms so you can live with less tension and more freedom on and away from your instrument. Enrollment is open until June 1st. Please go to thefunctionalmusician.com to sign up. The link is in the show notes below. Thanks! Hey there! Welcome back to another episode through the Flute 360 podcast. Y'all, you don't even know how pumped up I am. First of all, I have not been recording Flute 360 podcast episodes in quite some time. I think the last batch we recorded was kid you not, December or January. It's been a while. We batched record and then I've just been letting Lipson shoot out these episodes for a very long time. So I'm back in the air quote recording studio with my friend and colleague, Austin Pancner. And not only am I so pumped up that we are recording, but we're having a conversation with Austin, but we're also talking about something that I am so passionate about, and that's health and fitness, specifically for us as musicians. So Austin, before we get into your story and your background and all of that, hey, it's so good to see you.
Hi, it's good to see you too. Thank you for having me on and coming back from your long hibernation. I'm honored to be your first guest after 6 months?
Yeah.
5 months? It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, we've been having episodes air every week religiously, but I haven't recorded for quite some time. But yeah, to come out of hibernation with you feels really good.
Yeah, I can feel the energy in the room. I like it.
Well, I'm glad you can feel it. So you probably have an idea, but I am so pumped because literally getting in front of a microphone again is yes.
It's your space. It's your zone.
It is my space. Yeah. And then it's even more fun when I get to share that zone with a friend and a colleague. So thank you for reaching out.
Of course, and thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation too. And for those of you that can't see, because this is audio only, it is pitch black over where I am, but it's still daylight over where Heidi is. So pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it's Texas. The sun never goes down.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah.
I'm ready for bed. Nah.
Don't be jealous when it comes to 110 heat in the summer months. That is not fun.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. So if you hear any drilling or banging in the background, it's because Eric is putting in a screen door. It is 7:15 in the evening, and the guy is sweating bullets right now because it is so hot out there. he's dying. So that just goes to show you, like, it's 95 degrees at 7 in the evening.
Okay, well, I take back my my jealous statement for sure. I'll send you a bag of ice. How about that?
Nice. So yeah, Austin is back through Flute 360. He originally was featured in episode 171. So if you want to get a little bit more insight and you want to like really see how I picked Austin's brain even more, check out episode 171 because that was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, that was a real conversation. I actually remember, weirdly enough, the room, the time, and the day we had that conversation. Funny
Ooh.
enough. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember it too. I think I was recording in my apartment
Yeah.
before
Yeah,
moving to Dallas.
yeah, I was in a little basement shed at my parents' house. Fun times.
So we both have moved since then.
Yes, I'll be making a move too here in a couple of weeks as well. So exciting stuff.
That's right. I kid Austin. He knows that this isn't true, but he's obviously on here because he's a health and fitness expert for musicians, but it's because he's engaged to a flutist. So I don't hold it against him that he's a trombonist, but since he knows the flute world, he's always welcome.
Yeah, excuse me, bass trombonist. No.
Ooh, touche.
No, just kidding. I play tenor trombone too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, Rebecca Tatunik, yeah, my fiance. That's kind of a small world. And it's kind of funny how we actually didn't meet through that vein. We met, through other means. But yeah, I love her to death. She's great and super excited to begin a new journey with her.
Yeah, that's so cool. So if you have not listened to episode 171, I think, Austin, you and I probably need to take a few steps back and just have you introduce yourself, tell the listener your background and anything you want to share in that sense.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Austin Pancner. I am the founder and CEO of The Functional Musician, where I help musicians live and perform without pain. And I do this through a one-on-one recovery program that lasts 12 weeks. And I also do this through an injury prevention online group course that I run a couple of times a year. And to take a step back, in my master's degree and a performance diploma at Indiana University, I was playing in a lot of different ensembles. I was playing in jazz band, orchestra. I formed a brass quintet. I was preparing for auditions, a recital. I was in excerpt class. I was really trying to make the most out of my education. And I also switched to bass trombone a couple of months before that. So little did I know that I was pushing myself a little bit too hard. I started experiencing some physical symptoms that I've experienced before, and they just kind of went away, things like tightness, not pain so much, a little bit of pain, but more achiness, maybe some numbness, definitely fatigue. And I was just in jazz band one of those days. It was in October, like 2 months into school, and I went to pick up my horn and my left forearm blew out, just completely gave out. And luckily for me, I still remember it very, very vividly, but we were just sight reading through some music, figuring out what we were going to play in our next concert. And I was playing with a Brent Wallerab big band, and he puts his bass trombone next to the rhythm section. So I had a drummer next to me, and I had the bass next to me, and they were just going to town fortissimo with some kind of passage, and I literally screamed, and no one heard me. I may have yelled some profanity-like words, but I just kind of collected myself for a couple seconds. I was like, what just happened? And I had to excuse myself, because it's just so painful. It was radiating. It was super sharp. It was like a dagger. And luckily for me, the trombones have something called an ergobone. It's basically like a bipod for your trombone. And that was the only way I could hold up the trombone, because I really couldn't use my left forearm. I couldn't really use my thumbs or my fingers really either. So it took about 7 months to rehabilitate. But again, luckily I had that device, or I purchased that device, and I was able to continue my education and not have to take an extended leave of absence, even though in hindsight, I probably should have. But after that rehabilitation, I quickly started developing more pain, more tension. It spread to my shoulders. I developed a left shoulder injury. I developed a right shoulder injury. My chest and my upper body was so compressed. It got to the point where every time I tried to take a breath, anything like above 75, 80%, I actually felt physical pain in the front of my chest and in my back. It was like someone had a like a cigarette, and they lit it and they like were burning me, and it also felt like a dagger.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was not fun. It was not fun. And it all culminated a week before my first doctoral recital. What luck. Just great timing. I mean, I freaked out and I kept telling myself, no, 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 it's okay. You're not injured. Like, you're just getting performance nerves. But
Oh.
yeah, come performance day, everything. It was the worst it's ever been. And I barely made it through that recital. It was one of the most embarrassing moments, but it was also a very real moment that I can't keep ignoring the signs my body is sending me. I just can't. So I began my rehabilitation journey. That was quite a struggle. I went to various doctors who told me to consider different professions, take an extended leave off of trombone in school. I visited a couple of physical therapists that helped me manage my pain, empty the pain cup really well, but unfortunately whatever was happening kept coming back. So they were managing the symptoms, so to speak. I experimented with Alexander technique and it helped in some respect, but ultimately these things kept coming. Again, I went to Body Mapper, Feldenkrais. I even developed a yoga practice for like a year and a half. And I just kept falling to the same cycle where these flare-ups would happen. And when they happened, I couldn't play trombone. I really couldn't. I couldn't exercise. I didn't want to do anything. I was sad. I would get in these mindset cycles where it's just really down. It's like I feel that energy like come into me right now, just like reliving that a little bit. But it's like it was so dark and I was burnt out. I never took a break from school. I'm still technically in school. I'm finishing up my doctoral degree at Indiana University. I have my oral exams in 5 weeks. Everybody wish me luck.
Yeah.
I've been studying so hard for it. It's so much information, but I'm excited to, go out there, hit it out of the park and do my best. That's the only thing I can really do at this point. But, when you're in school for that long, combined with that injury that lasted, a solid 3 years and some change, and going through all of the, advice that I was given from mentors and teachers and recommendations from medical professionals, it was like some, things still weren't getting better. And it took me a long time to realize what happened. And, these things, we often think about injuries as these, this one event, like one event happened, but it was really just, years and years and years of habits that built up over time. And I started seeing the return on that in my body. Something that I heard the other day that I really like, it's a quote, it's the body always keeps score. And boy, was it telling me the score. It was like Patriots 3-28 Super Bowl type of deal. And I was just freaking out, but everything has a silver lining, right? So what happened is basically I was like, okay, I'm burnt out. I'm done with school. I'm done with school. I'm going to go be a zoologist. I'm going to go do something. It'll be awesome. Everybody loves animals. I love animals. Except I couldn't be a veterinarian. I could not do that. But, so I was like, okay, so I have a scholarship. I'm very grateful and fortunate to receive one. I'm going to finish my education. And my grandpa was also supporting me at that time through my education. So I felt like I owed it to them to continue through that. And I'm still very grateful for that privilege. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I'm like, I need to step away from the music environment. I need to do something. I need to learn something that's not music. So what I ended up settling on, I did my research and I settled on a personal trainer certification from the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And what really piqued my interest is they had another specialty or special certification where you had to take the personal training first, and it was called corrective exercise specialist. And I was like, corrective exercise, that sounds really interesting. What's that about? And I researched that. I'm like, I wanted to get that. So it was kind of like a 2-step process to get there. So when I was working on that corrective exercise certification, I started applying the concepts to myself. I started applying it to other musicians who were like, hey, Austin, you want to go to the gym? I'm like, I want to ask you something. I'm like, cool. Yeah, sure. Let's do it. And it just kind of organically happened where I started seeing just huge improvements in how I moved, my alignment, my posture, my breathing, my mental focus, and my clarity. And it started bleeding into other areas of life. And it got to the point where I started feeling a little happier. I was like, wow, this is a good feeling. I haven't felt this in a while, just from taking care of my physical health. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to play trombone. And it was like 6 months after that 3-year mark, and I could actually play trombone for 15 minutes without pain. And I was like, yep, okay. It took time to get over that burnout, but I think I'm going to try this again. And I did. And within the span of 3 more months, I was able to get back to playing for 2 to 3 hours a day.
Okay.
Now, granted, like I still have a long way to go. I was injured for a while and, you don't play for that long. You kind of lose a lot of the stuff you built. So it took a while for it to come back. But it got to the point where I was like, okay, I overcame it, but I was seeing other people at Indiana University, other friends and colleagues going through the same thing, going down the same medical professional route, going down the same help that I got, and we're still kept falling into that cycle of flare-ups, of pain, of burnout, of injury. And I was like, I got to do something. So I just basically spent, all the way up to today, actually just kind of like researching this, gaining more certifications and setting the foundation for the functional musician. And there were a couple of business things that I did, pitch competitions through Indiana University that went really well, and that some went very poorly, that were great learning experiences. But it got to the point where, COVID hit. I was living with my now fiance, she was girlfriend. I was living with her parents. We originally thought we were going to spend a week in Florida. And then the whole COVID thing happened. And it was like, oh, we're spending a long time in Florida. So luckily, like her family's awesome and we get along very well. It was really like a second family type of situation. But it was like, okay, like it's either I do it now or it's never going to happen, because I'm definitely one of those people who gets an idea and I'm like, I want to do it. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I often have to rein myself in, or else I'm so spread thin that I'm not really doing much anything.
I am the same way.
Yeah. It's just like, I would define it as like a creative, where you're just kind of like, you have all of these ideas. Like I can tell you, I get like $5 million ideas like every day.
Wow.
Yeah, even though they're not really $1 million ideas, I'll tell them to people and they're like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But I'll be like, well, it could work.
It's kind of like Kramer through Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Like inventions and the pizza idea, make your own pie. That's where my mind went. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it.
So I want to kind of go back a little bit because, you said a lot and there was a lot of gems in there. The one thing that my mind went to was, I wanted to ask you this question about, like, was it a singular event? Because you said going from tenor trombone to bass trombone. So I'm a flutist. I think I know, but I probably don't know. Is it heavier? And by going to this other instrument, was it specifically because you were playing the bass trombone that it was like what's that saying? The straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, well, it definitely didn't help. It was definitely the straw that broke the camel's back for sure. I basically played actually the same bass trombone as I did tenor. The only addition was I had 2 valves instead of 1.
Okay.
So basically allows me to play a little bit lower than a tenor trombone.
Okay.
And we can imagine a bass trombone anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 pounds heavier than a tenor trombone. And the way you hold it too, the slide is just a little bit wider on the bass trombone. So if you have a really small hand, it's going to be a very big difference. If you have big hands, it's not so much. I'm kind of in the middle of the road there.
Okay.
But there were so many factors that came into play. And when we talk about overuse injuries, which, carpal tunnel, tendonitis, cubital tunnel, all of these things are related to overuse. And when we think about injuries, we can think about something that was cumulative, it built over time, and then we can think about something as like a catastrophic injury. And I would argue that most people who experience some type of chronic pain or some type of injury as a musician are probably in that first category of cumulative, it's built over time, you're starting to see that return on investment, so to speak. But a catastrophic injury would be like a car crash, breaking your leg, falling on the ice and adjusting your back, or, some type of injury that is very catastrophic, that's going to take months and months of rehabilitation and medical professional care type of thing.
I see. The reason why I ask that is because since we are talking to flutists, we obviously have different flutes in our family, right? And different weights of flute. Like for the C flute, we have different weights depending on the metals. So I remember like when I was buying a new flute in my master's program, I went from a Yamaha flute that was handmade, pretty standard silver weight. Then I bought a Jack Moore flute my second year going into my master's degree. And the thing was a heavy wall, so much heavier. There was gold content in it. And I was not prepared for the weight difference.
Yeah.
And I probably had accumulation of like maybe there was postural problems, or there was something where I could have, had a stronger back. But like for me, and when I started noticing like the flare-ups in my hands, it was months after, pretty soon after the new flute purchase. And
Oh
I
man.
think, and I think the weight contributed to that injury. Of course, like what you're saying, there was probably like a foundational thing going on, and then new flute, and then it became visibly more worse. So I'm thinking of other flutists out there who are so used to piccolo playing, right? And
Mhm.
then, I don't know, like even C flute playing, and then being told, oh, quick, you have an audition, alto flute is there, or you're going to play alto flute or bass flute in the flute choir coming up, quick practice. Can we talk to that person? Because, like, obviously the bass flute weighs a lot different than the piccolo, right? So,
Mhm.
what I'm hearing you say is, and correct me if I'm wrong, these foundational things and how we treat our body and how we exercise and how we approach our instruments, like strength training, perhaps, need to be there within our foundation. So that way, when we go from tenor trombone to bass trombone or from piccolo to bass flute, our bodies are more prepared. Would
Mhm.
that be a fair assessment, or am I totally like left field?
You're speaking my language, but I
Okay.
want to add on that is we do have to have a foundation to support our playing in and outside the practice room to live the life that we envision, whether it's as a performer, as a teacher, freelancer, or even a pit musician or a touring musician. The demands of that environment and that career are going to be different, but they are going to be similar.
Okay.
And something we talk about in a future episode is how to build our own injury prevention model. And there are a couple of things that we want to consider whether we're doing something like strength training or flexibility or mobility or yoga, or maybe we're a marathon runner. We still want to have some goals we're going for. For example, we want to have an injury prevention model that allows us to manage our pain if pain does come up, because sometimes,
Mm,
unfortunately, with intense rehearsal practices, with traveling, hydration, sleep,
mm,
there's so many different factors, alignment, posture, stress, all of these things can influence our system, our body, and our mind. And sometimes pain is unavoidable. And we need to
yeah.
find ways to deal with that and manage with that without having to resort to more symptomatic type potential solutions such as icing or ibuprofen or other self medicating options such as alcohol.
Mm,
So I think that's one component of that injury prevention. But if we have that foundation where we can move without pain, if we understand how our body is supposed to move and we have a high quality of movement and we understand how the environment affects our body, I think that can put a huge superpower on us to prevent and manage these things as they pop up. So let's say if we did switch to an instrument rather than purchase the instrument and 2 months in, you're like, oh my gosh, like this isn't the instrument for me. It's just too much. It's too much of a load for my body. You would have realized as you were trying it out, you're like, wow, this is really heavy. I'm not used to it. This is putting a lot of tension on my wrist, which leads to my elbow. I can feel a little more tension too in my upper back. I don't think this is going to be a good fit for me, type of
mm.
deal. But that also stems from having a huge level of body awareness with, the different feeling or the awareness of different feelings in your body as you move through time and space, essentially. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Totally there with you. So is that, not that I'm judging anybody, because I am in this camp. And you were at in this camp at one point.
Yes,
Is that
100%.
is that the number one mistake that us musicians make, is lack of knowledge, lack of body awareness? Because knowledge is power, right? And if
Yeah.
we can have that awareness of our bodies in space, and oh yeah, like what you were saying, wrist, oh wow, that is a heavier instrument, look at what it's doing to the wrist, to the elbow, to the right. So
Hmm.
do you think, and this kind of goes back to your really cool groovy Instagram reel that you did with like the butterfly in the sky music in the background, like the
Yeah,
question was in that reel, like why is this not taught in the standard music curriculum at the universities?
100%.
Why not?
100%.
And when I saw that, and from episode 171, like, oh, Austin, I don't know if you know this, but like, this is why 360 was started, was because of series 1, episodes 1 through 4 is all on health, where I did research and I talked to people because the lack of knowledge in my music education about health and fitness was not there. And it made me almost angry because when I went through that injury, I was afraid for my career. I was
Yep.
afraid for all the degrees that I had invested in. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to support myself through my instrument and be able to teach and perform that I had trained for how many years. And the support and the knowledge was not there. And when you look back in hindsight's a funny thing. When you look back, you're like, ooh, if somebody would have just told me, informed me, so that way I can start, like filling my noggin with this information. Like you said, prevention is like the best medicine. I think that's like a Benjamin Franklin quote, right? And so it's like, how many injuries within the musician's world could be prevented if that knowledge was there? So, full circle, that's why I started 360 to put out into the world my research on rest, exercise, strength training, essential oils, how to eat well. Did I say sleep? I think I said rest. Because that was like, I wish, because when I did my master's and graduated around 23, 24, I was like, oh my gosh, I wished 15-year-old Heidi would have known this information. So anyways, I'm getting down off my soapbox, but that is literally the premise of 360 is this holistic idea of you are not just a player. You have to see yourself as like, how are you treating yourself in your day-to-day life, like driving, behind the wheel, typing, what's going on in your head? What are the thoughts? And then as a business person, as an instrumentalist, it's all connected, right? It's all connected. And if we're not taking care of ourselves first as a human, how can we expect to play well and play to the best of our ability if we're not eating well or sleeping or hydrating ourselves, etc.? Anyways, I went down a massive tangent because you can obviously see that I am so passionate about this. When you said a lack of knowledge or like, why is this not taught in the curriculum? Ooh, you could tell I was getting fired up.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes me so mad too. It just does not make sense to me. And I literally had conversations last week with several different parents who thankfully found my page, but they're like so flabbergasted. I'm going to use that word flabbergasted that schools aren't teaching about this. These parents were very concerned for their sons and daughters, very concerned for their children. And, they have a right to. Those statistics aren't pretty. And I love your soapbox. It was great. I'm going to listen to that on repeat as just like a motivational quote and then put a picture of Dwayne Johnson next to you. But, to go back and answer your question, I don't think there is a number one mistake that musicians make, but I do think there are some pitfalls that we can fall into really easily. Just to kind of piggyback of what you said. Number one, you said information was power. And yes, I 100% agree. But you can have all of the information in the world, but if you don't take any action with that information, how much change or how much difference are you going to make? And that's something that I've embedded into both my injury prevention program and my recovery program, is this idea of creating daily habits, creating routines of showing up for yourself with whatever you're doing, whether it's from a prevention standpoint or recovery standpoint. That way I'm supplying the information, but I'm also allowing people to learn and grow in an environment that encourages them to show up for themselves every day. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're not taking that action towards a goal that you want, it's just a dream. It's just an idea. You're just thinking about it. This is something I'm constantly thinking about. And the whole idea, going back to being the driver of your life, with overuse injuries and being a musician and a performer or a teacher, I want to help musicians become the drivers of their health and wellness. I want to empower them to have that decision to be like, wow, I pushed myself a little too hard physically on that concert. You know what? I'm going to do some self-massage, some mobility, and some light breathing for 10 minutes before I go to bed so that this goes away and I feel, when I wake up, I feel more refreshed. I feel ready to go and I can still practice tomorrow. I don't have to take 3 days off because I'm in sharp, tender, achy, sore pain.
Hmm.
And there's a superpower, again, saying that word superpower. I just watched Superman the other day, so it's on my mind, but it's like the superpower that we have. It's like we can take control of that situation. We can be in control of our health. And once we have that decision, no
Mm.
one can take it away from you. It's just up to you to make that decision, to listen to the signs your body and your mind are telling you in any given moment.
Yeah. If you're a listener and you're listening to this, no matter what degree of pain you are in right now, if you are in pain, I loved what Austin just said. If it's not being taught in your music curriculum, then you sit in the driver's seat and you have the power to feed your beautiful noggin with great information that's going out there through programs like Austin, and the programs that he's offering, but then to start implementing and taking action. Because you're right, like I can buy all the books on the shelves, right? But if I don't actually open up the books and read it and consider the information and start implementing it, then it's just a $5 book sitting on my shelf. And I love that superpower. We have that superpower, right? And I think that's so important to say that because I think, especially during an injury, I can only speak for myself. But when I was going through that injury, holy moly, I beat myself up pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I let this happen. I was the worst musician ever. You obviously don't know how to hold the flute. You think all the thoughts, right? And then you start spiraling down into this pit of depression. And it's hard to get out of that place, especially when it comes to something that you love so much and you've dedicated your life towards your art.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think when the right people were put into my life, like Dr. Susan Fain, some people through Arasti, things like that, I wished I would have. It was great that I had them. I wished I would have had more Austin Pancners in my life at the time. But once I started talking to them, that knowledge started giving me hope. It was like, oh, kind of like what you just said with the statistic, not if it happens, when it happens. 60. And then when I heard the same statistic around, like, oh my gosh, 15 years ago, 63 to 93% or whatever you rattled off. I heard that same statistic when I was in my season of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy smokes. Well, okay. Like you said, if I wasn't one of the 7%, that's a small fraction of people. And then you start realizing like you're not that bad of a musician, and then you can start pulling yourself out of that tunnel of depression. And then you can start feeding yourself with knowledge and saying, oh, I can strengthen my back. I can strengthen the muscles between my shoulder blades. Oh, I can, do you know what I mean? And of course, like your program would break down what all those steps would include, but I feel it. And I think you can, I can just feel it in my core. Like, oh, you don't have to be alone and you don't have to do it alone.
Right. And doing it alone is such a scary thing, especially with, many people going to, online and transitioning to online. There's a lot of very conflicting information out there. So much conflicting information. And a lot of the times when we start experiencing pain, it's like, I'm going to go research this. I'm going to go research this. I'm going to go research this until I figure out what I need to do. The research that is available is there to guide us. It's there to help us, but it doesn't necessarily tell us how to get out of our cycle because everybody's injury is unique to their specific situation. With musicians, you add in another complexity of the instrument you play, of the love you have for music, the complexity of the mental loopholes that we feel like we fall into, maybe the toxic or non-toxic environment of, your environment at work or school. There's so many factors that come into play. And I would just encourage anybody out there who is experiencing an injury is definitely go get the advice of a medical professional, but something to ask yourself at the end of the day before you decide to get surgery, before you decide to get cortisone shots, before you decide to, do work with anybody. Number one, ask yourself if you trust them. Number two, ask them what they think is going on with you. Does your gut actually believe that? Number three, just because they're a medical professional doesn't mean you have to put all of your eggs into them. You can get a second opinion. And the most important thing is that you find someone who is a good fit, who meets you where you are, and wants to, tries to, and strives to educate you on your situation. Because our healthcare system has a lot of cons. It has a lot of benefits, but one of the cons is that education is not usually a part of that. And for you to take control of your life, for you to take control of the driver's wheel, so to speak, since we're on that theme, you're going to need to understand in depth why your situation happened, what can contribute to that happening in the future, and what you can do to prevent that from happening in the future. Or else you're going to resort to your old habits that you already established right after that surgery, or right after that shot, or right after, that 2-week-long massage therapy session. And then guess what's going to happen? Chances are the same symptoms, the same cycle is going to keep happening because ultimately you are doing the same things that contributed to that.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Yeah. No, I love this. So I did not say this in the beginning, and I apologize to the listeners, but I have Austin for 4 episodes in May. So I believe this is episode 202. And in 203 through 205, we're going to be diving into more specific topics. Like in episode 203, we're going to be kind of peeling back this onion in terms of specific injuries, like perhaps, or specific pain points like carpal tunnel, tendonitis, arthritis, things like that. So I think today's talk was an amazing conversation where we can lay out the foundation. We got to know Austin really well. We got to hear about like common mistakes, get really jazzed up about what's not being taught in school, and so much more. Obviously, guys, you can tell that like Austin is so passionate about this, and not just that because it happened to him, right? Earlier in the conversation, you said, Austin, you went down this rabbit hole to find the information that you needed, right? You tried Alexander technique, you tried body mapping, etc. So you are certified, correct? And what are your certifications?
Yeah, sure. So I am certified as a personal trainer. I'm certified in corrective exercise. I have a certification in precision nutrition. I have a certification in mobility and movement, and I'm also a Ready State coach, and that is a company that Dr. Kelly Starrett founded back about 14 years ago. And he has a lot of mobility methods out there that have been pretty revolutionary for the way I approach pain management. It's been very helpful. And right now I'm also working on a biomechanics certification with Bill Hartman and Connor Harris and Zach Couples. And they're all based around the Postural Restoration Institute model of approaching human movement, which is super fascinating and a very interesting rabbit hole that's very complex, but it's so... it's amazing. I just absolutely love it. So Bill Hartman, Zach Couples, Connor Harris, go check those 3 guys out. They know their stuff. But
cool.
The learning never stops. The learning never stops. And as you get into this too, it's like for anybody out there who wants to get into health and wellness, it's like definitely go explore body mapping, go explore Alexander technique and strength training and all of these things. But remember that as we move through the 21st, 22nd century, the human movement system is going to continue to grow. Our knowledge is going to continue to grow. And therefore, we need to push ourselves to find more information that's keeping up with that line of thinking, because everything continues to evolve as we evolve with it. And there's always going to be a rabbit hole you can go down to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. So Austin and I are going to take a water break. But if you are digging this and you are really just soaking up the value, don't go anywhere. Like we have got Austin for 4 luxurious episodes. So episode 203, since this is the end of episode 202, episode 203 is a little different. It's going to be aired on Thursday. I know you guys are in a Tuesday flow with me, but just so you know, 203 is going to be launching on Thursday. So stick around for this 4-part series. I can't wait to pick Austin's brain even further. Thank you, Austin. Thank you for tuning into the Flute 360 podcast. We so appreciate the support. Now, friendly reminder, you want to head on over to thefunctionalmusician.com and grab your seat to Austin Pancner's 8-week injury prevention course. When I look back in my career and I think of the valuable resource that Austin is providing to our community, I'm kind of a little jealous. I wished I would have had a resource like this earlier on in my career. Take advantage of his knowledge, his friendship, and his expertise so that way you can start moving the needle forward in terms of your health and fitness as a modern-day musician. Go to thefunctionalmusician.com before June 1st and grab your seat today. Thanks!
Let's talk about Flute.